I'd like to say welcome to everyone who's been able to join on time today to the Open Academy webinar on maximizing your influence. My name's Jacqueline Bowman-Busato. I'm the head of policy at the European Association for the Study of Obesity. I'm based in Brussels, but very, very online as well. And we're going to be digging into that a bit later. Today, I am delighted to be joined by three, quite frankly, legends in their space. He will be Dr. Vishal Virani, who's head of health at YouTube, Joe Freeman, who is the social and digital lead at the National Health Service in the UK, and Alistair Dick, who is associate director digital healthcare at the global agency BCW. Do not ask me what that actually stands for. We just all know it as BCW. Next slide, please. So next slide, please. So a bit of housekeeping before we move on. Please be aware that this meeting is being recorded and that it will be uploaded onto the Open Obesity Policy Engagement Network YouTube channel so that you'll be able to access this and send it to your friends, family, and generally be able to profile that you actively participated in this webinar. The other main point that I wanted to mention as well is that there is time for questions following each presentation, and also there'll be a very short exercise which you should be thinking about as we go through all of the discussions. There'll also be a Q&A as well in the final segment of this meeting. Next slide, please. So we're going to kick off firstly with Dr. Virani. Vishal, welcome. Who's going to be talking about building influence through an online presence. Then Joe Freeman from the NHS will be discussing and giving us a few tips and tricks on creating impact through an online presence. And then Alistair is going to talk us through creating online visibility. Now, don't forget, all the way through, you can be posting questions in the chat primarily so that we can all see. If you have a very specific question that you'd like answered, we'll also be monitoring the Q&A. And also start thinking, because you will be asked to do this, in terms of what can you be doing, what are you taking from this whole discussion in order to boost your own social and digital presence, be that as an individual and or in the context of your organization. So next slide, please. So in terms of our objectives, we want to help you strengthen your social and digital capabilities. Now, yes, you need the bottom line, hence our first set of discussions, but also you need to start to have an idea of how this can support your policy and advocacy efforts. We also therefore want to deliver tangible guidance. This is not a show and tell, it's really a discussion. Imagine you're around a kitchen table and you can actually have the discussion with the gathered experts. And then also we want to be able to share insights amongst each other. So not just the people on the screen presenting, but really as a group. So that, again, you can strengthen and influence your credibility through social media and digital platforms in general, so that you can effectively reach decision makers, be those decision makers in terms of health system users, so you and me when we don't have our day jobs, and or policy decision makers. Next slide, please. I've already made the introductions. You see the faces, you see the Q&A. At this point, next slide, please. It is my great pleasure to hand over to Vishal Virani, who will take us through, from a YouTube digital platforms perspective, building influence through online presence. Over to you, Vishal.
Thank you very much, Jacqueline. Just a bit of housekeeping one. If Emily, if you're able to let me share my screen, then I can pull my slides up for the presentation. So I can get the main. Oh, here we go. Perfect. We are set. Okay, let me just get my slides. So, hi everyone, thank you for being here today, and thank you for having me. As Jacqueline said, I am from the YouTube Health team, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about why you should, as an organization, as a sort of individual expert, create health content on YouTube, but then also why you should advocate for your respective communities to consume health content on YouTube as well. Give you a little bit of an overview about YouTube Health and what the initiative is focused on, and then also share some more practical sort of best practices for building an influential platform and creating impact, which will hopefully be a nice segue to Joe's session, which will go into a bit more detail about the things that his team has been doing with their fantastic NHS channel. So I am going to start by just giving you a little bit of sort of context about YouTube and the way in which it's used across the UK population. Now, a lot of my data is for the UK, but you can assume that it's quite similar for a lot of other countries around the world, given the global platform that we've got. So YouTube is the only platform to reach over 90% of people across all age groups. And so, this is when compared to other social media platforms, but also traditional media, such as the BBC websites. And so we've got really high penetration amongst the UK population. And people are actually spending a significant amount of time on YouTube as well. So it's not just a case of watching one or two quick videos and moving on. They're really sticking around for quite a long period, and for example, longer than on any of these other platforms, including the BBC website. So the point here with these few slides is that you really should fish where the fish are. So everyone is basically on YouTube consuming content on all sorts of different topics. So you need to hit them with your messages on YouTube as well. And actually, amongst 18 to 34-year-olds, they're spending an average of 70 minutes per day on the platform, and that's grown by 20% since 2017. But also, it's not just that there's lots of people using YouTube in the UK. They're also consuming a lot of health content on the platform. So last year in the UK alone, we had over 3 billion views of health videos. There were over 110 billion globally. And as of December 2022, there are 1.4 million health videos available from UK sources on the platform. And so, there is both a lot of demand, but also supply on the platform. However, that supply is not always from authoritative sources, and that's what we're working very hard to do, to try and encourage more and more authoritative sources to get involved on the platform. Just a couple of other interesting data points from third parties that highlight similar messages, but not YouTube specific. So an Edelman survey done earlier this year showed that actually pre versus post pandemic, there's a 3x increase amongst those surveyed in wanting to educate themselves about health issues, but also a 3x increase in the desire to verify whether the health information they see is true or not. And so that's a lot of what we're doing at YouTube in terms of the health initiative. And there was a recent survey done in June via a few sort of primary care service providers that surveyed 161 clinicians, found that 93% of those clinicians surveyed thought that video content was helpful for their patients in terms of information sharing. And actually, YouTube was the number one video platform that was recommended. This QR code links to the full results. There's quite a lot of different things that they covered in that study, and it was mostly not YouTube specific. So it may be interesting for you guys to see, just to get an understanding of how clinicians are thinking about sharing information with their patients and how they go about doing it, why they do it, that type of thing. So in terms of the YouTube Health mission, we're dedicated to making high quality health information easily accessible to everyone. So it sort of covered the everyone piece with some of the data I've just shared around the penetration of the UK population that we're reaching. Easily accessible is this idea that actually there are such a range of different perspectives on the platform, and you can tailor messages to a variety of different communities, variety of different languages, ethnicities. And the high quality piece is what we're working really hard on with our product features and partnerships, to try and elevate content which is coming specifically from authoritative sources and flag that to viewers, which I'll cover in a little bit more detail shortly. So the two approaches that we take to the maintaining high quality information on the platform is to both remove blatant misinformation and then also raise up high quality information. So in terms of the removing of misinformation, we've got a variety of different medical misinformation policies that allow us to transparently and objectively remove health misinformation from the platform. And so recently we launched a new, much more comprehensive health medical information misinformation policy that covers prevent all content related to prevention, denial, and treatment of any health condition. And so it gives us a really strong basis for removing basically a lot of the health misinformation that it appears on the platform. And then the other part of what we're doing is basically these health features. If you search for any health topic on the platform, such as breast cancer, at the top of the search results, you see a shelf labeled from health sources that contains videos specifically coming from authoritative sources like the NHS, health charities, and also individual clinicians. And if you then click on any one of those videos, you see a label such as from a licensed doctor, which helps the viewers understand what the nature of the sort of the source and the reason why we think this is an authoritative, credible video. And this shelf sits at the top of the search results. And so we have labels such as from a licensed doctor, from a channel with a licensed healthcare professional, if it's an organization, from a licensed psychologist, from a licensed nurse. And this work has been underpinned by our partnership with the Academy of Medical Royal Colleges and NHS England, who have helped us to define what high quality health information content looks like. And so if you go on the AOMRC website in their reports section, you will see this paper from May 2023, where they convene a variety of different stakeholders that you see on the right of this screen. And one of the steps that individuals and organizations that want to be part of the health features, the health shelves that I just showed you, one of the steps they have to jump through is to self-attest against these content standards. And in terms of the impact that these health shelves can have, this is an example from NHS 24 in Scotland, and this is actually every NHS organisation by default is now included in these health shelves. And so this is what happened. The green arrows show what happened once they were included in the health shelves, and you can see that there was a meaningful increase in viewership. And so the idea here is content that is authoritative, we're trying to raise it up, we're trying to increase the viewership of that content on the platform. And these health features are actually now available globally. And so, for example, if you are a user in Nigeria searching for diabetes in English or obesity in English, a health shelf will trigger with content potentially from UK sources, but basically from English language sources. And so basically in every single country around the world, currently excluding Australia, you will now see these health shelves, and you will see content appearing depending on which language you're searching in. And actually, this is really important because for several of our health channels, over 50% of the viewership derives from outside the UK. And there's a lot of channels which have been included in the first wave of these health shelves. The eligibility criteria, as I mentioned, it's self-attesting against the AOMRC content principles. It's the fact that you have to be a licensed and practicing doctor, nurse, or psychologist, or even as an organization have one of these individuals as part of your organization. You need to have a channel that's focused on health education, and you also need to have over 2,000 hours of watch time over the past 12 months. This is a QR code if you wanted to look into the application process for your channel. If any of you guys listening in are currently running health information focused YouTube channel, you can just go and apply via that QR code. And so, what does this all mean? Actually, this health content leads to meaningful real world impact. So, you see this comment at the top, which is from a video that one of our GP creators put together. Dr. James O'Donovan had a video on signs and symptoms of bowel cancer. And one of the viewers' comments was, if it were not for one of these videos, I would not have got myself checked out. And I'm now about to have a kind of an operation for my bowel cancer. So and then there's a survey underneath, and this is from Joe's channel on the community tab of the NHS channel, where they have been asking viewers what the impact has been of the videos they've been creating. So here you can see a survey about a recent video they did on bowel cancer symptoms, and you can see the extent to which people are saying that yes, they actually better understand how to check for bowel cancer symptoms on the back of this survey, on the back of this video that the NHS team put together. And YouTube is also a launchpad to create wider impact. So beyond the work that our sort of individual healthcare professional creators and organizations are doing on YouTube, they're now also publishing books which are reaching many more people and, you know, reaching them in different ways. They are launching apps to help manage your blood pressure. So this is Abraham the pharmacist and one of our creators and his app. And then you've got podcasts, for example. Dr. Curran has partnered with Sony Music Entertainment to put together a podcast, you know, dispelling medical myths. And this slide, I just wanted to point you in the direction of some of our big creators in the UK, some of the big channels, so that you can use them as a means of sort of getting inspired for the content that you may look to create, or some of the content you may want to share with your patient communities. So you've got Dr. Julie, who's got a focus on mental health content. You've got Dr. Curran, who's dispelling medical myths. Dr. Simi, who's got Love Women's and skin health content. You've got Geeky Medics, which is a medical education platform for medical students and doctors. And so these channels have reached over 1 million subscribers. And then you can see on the right side of the screen, you've got a few more creators who've sort of reached over 100,000 subscribers at the moment, such as Dr. James O'Donovan, who I mentioned. You've got Dr. Khalid Zalmay's channel. You've got Dr. Vic Veer's channel. These are a mix of specialists, consultant specialists, and then also GPs in the UK are creating really good health education content for viewers. And, you know, I talked before in our mission statement about the fact that YouTube is for everyone. And so we've now started working on an AI-powered dubbing solution, which will enable you to translate your English videos or create an AI-powered dub very seamlessly and efficiently of your English language content into Spanish and Portuguese. Hindi and Indonesian are coming soon. And so, you know, this is a technology that we're very excited about, hopefully increases accessibility of content going forward. Unfortunately, I don't think this video will play. I don't think it's playing ball today, so apologies. But you know, basically, it was an example of a Spanish dub of a video around switching insulin, which was originally created in English. So I think it plays, but without the video. Without the audio. So it's not very useful. And then we're also sort of approaching this from the angle of the patient's lived experience. And so in 1 or 2 weeks, you'll start to see a different type of shelf on the YouTube platform in the UK called Personal Stories. So if you search for terms such as living with anxiety, living with breast cancer, you'll see this Personal Stories shelf, and that shines a light on content that is coming from individuals and also organizations who are sharing experiences of individuals living with a particular condition. So I've highlighted a couple of examples here of you know, of lived experience content on the platform. There's the Aspie World, which is a channel focused on this individual's experience living with autism. And then you've got Mr. Colitis Crohn's, who's sharing his experience of living with a stoma, living with colitis and Crohn's. And actually, Joe's channel has also got a series called My Story, which is shining a light on patient stories related to a range of different conditions. And those videos have done really well on the platform for the NHS. And now I want to transition to just giving you a few practical tips about creating content on YouTube. And so what I always say to everyone is YouTube is hard. So I think sometimes you put a bit of content on Instagram or TikTok and you can have an overnight success. You can become an overnight success and get lots and lots of traction very quickly. The truth is YouTube is hard. The algorithm is set up slightly differently. So we're not sort of rewarding just recency and rewarding what is just the latest trend. Therefore, growth is a slow burner. But actually, YouTube is also a place where content never dies. So you can have a long-term impact and build an engaged community, which is valuable on and off the platform. So the idea here is that the content you create on YouTube is valuable for the long term. So people will keep coming back to it multiple years down the line, but also they will then start to follow the other content that you're creating, and you can build this engaged community, which is harder on other platforms. And so, you know, this last bit is a little bit more for individual creators than organizations, but, you know, it's about playing the long game, taking breaks when you need to, and kind of having fun with the process, because it won't be immediately rewarding in terms of the viewership. Really important when you're starting your channel to think about your why. So what's the mission? What is the key message that you're trying to get across? What is your key audience? Who's your ideal viewer? But then also, what's your spiky point of view on a particular topic that you've nailed down and sort of said that you want to focus on? Because there is so much content on YouTube. And so you really need to understand what you are bringing to the table that viewers can only find on your channel, whether that be because of the type of communities that you're focused on, whether that be because of the entertaining personalities that you've got who are fronting your video content, whether that be because you've got ways and means of distributing your content off the platform that will drive a lot of traffic to the video. I think you need to understand what your spiky point of view is, or what your leverage is, to try to get people to watch your content on the platform. And ultimately, success on YouTube is about understanding your audience. In terms of, then you would not, then once you've figured out your why, you need to think about what exact topics you're going to focus on, or which are the subtopics. If you've nailed down that you want to basically do content on obesity, or maybe on preventing obesity, which are the subtopics around that are the most fruitful to focus on initially? And so you can use Google Trends to help with this. There's a wealth of information on there. If you go to the Explore tab on Google Trends, you can see which are some of the most common search terms for a particular condition. You can compare one subtopic to another subtopic for a particular condition, for example, and see what the viewer search interest has been over time. You can then also go into the trending now section and look at the daily search trends, which will sometimes include health topics, or look at real-time search trends, and that can be helpful to sort of respond in real time to trends and to topics that people are looking for information around, that you might want to sort of address on the platform. You can also lean into current events, so you can look at the trending tab on YouTube, which will show you some of the videos that are trending, not necessarily health specific. You may then want to use those as a hook, or as a starting point for the content that you're going to create. If you type in a topic such as obesity or diabetes on the platform, you will then autocomplete will show you which are the most commonly related subtopic search queries for that particular condition or that topic. This is obviously a dynamic process that's ever changing. And then you can also look at the news section on YouTube. Obviously, a lot of people are now consuming their news content on YouTube, so you can see which are the breaking stories. They're often related to health topics, and so you might want to use that as a starting point to say, what should I create content on? Once you've figured out what topics you might want to focus on, you need to think about the different formats that you might want to might want to try. And one of the ways to be really successful on the platform is to really experiment with different approaches. So you can do things like reaction videos, reacting to what's been common in mainstream media, or what's been a current hot Netflix show. It doesn't have to be that it was health related, but there may be health topics that are raised within that video. Medical news, which we talked about. You may want to think about collaborations between different types of personalities, which will help to cross-pollinate and give you a broader audience for your content. Explainer videos obviously make a lot of sense for health content. Animation videos can be really good for those with lower health literacy. Interviews can be really helpful when you're doing a doctor versus patient interview, for example. And then you can also do Q&As where you're popping up most commonly asked questions about a particular topic, and then you can have a doctor answer them, and this could work as a live stream as well. In terms of the metrics that are important, it's important to think about the funnel in this way. You basically need to think about your title and your thumbnail as your shop window. So most people are going to find health content via search. So they're going to enter a particular query, and they're going to look at the search results that are at the top of that page. If your video does appear on that page, it's then a question of, is the title and the thumbnail as a package appealing enough for people to want to click on? So that becomes your click-through rate. Once people have clicked through, you want to understand what percentage of your video they're actually watching. So are they watching most of it because it's really engaging, or they click on it, but whilst the title and thumbnail were great, it wasn't really covering the topics they thought it would be, and therefore they've clicked away. Then you want to look overall at the overall watch time for a video. That's the most important metric, which gives you an indication of whether people are sort of enjoying your video or not. Authenticity is really important when you create content. You don't need high production value. I think most importantly, you need to share a bit of your personality on the channel. So if it's an organization, you may identify one or two individuals who you can have fronting a lot of your content, so people get to know them over a period of time and they can share their personality. Doesn't have to be too polished. So really high production values don't actually work that well always on YouTube. Sometimes the more authentic, lower production value works a lot better. A few tips for keeping viewers engaged. You should get straight to the point. Avoid long-winded intros like you may do on a kind of TV program. Skip straight to the content, because people want to be hit with the content that the title suggests that they're going to be getting as soon as they hit play on YouTube. Keep your video focused, so align your content very closely with the title. Don't veer away from what you put in your title, because viewers will otherwise feel shortchanged. Good audio quality is really key, actually much more important than video quality in a way. So you can use your phone for filming, but try to buy a camera, sorry, a mic, even if it's a 10 or 15 pound mic, which you plug into your phone. It will make a really big difference to the audio quality and to the sort of engagement of the video. For longer videos, consider chapters. You may want to split something up into 4 or 5 different questions, and eye contact facing the camera, as opposed to using this type of side angle view, is much more engaging. And sometimes, you know, for TV, for traditional TV, that side angle view can be quite helpful or professional, but actually the eye contact face the camera is much more important for YouTube content. And then just a couple more slides. I talked before about the thumbnail. So here's just 4 examples of really good thumbnails where you can see that there's basically not too much text. There's a good combination though of text and images. There isn't too much text on the platform, on the thumbnail. The text is in large font. You can see really good use of contrasting colors, such as the white text on the black background, such as the black and the yellow. You can see that the images are very clear for anyone to be able to understand whatever language they speak. So that way you might even get people who don't speak English clicking on them. Sometimes having your face, having a face on the video can be really helpful, on the thumbnail can be really helpful in terms of bringing it to life and making it more relatable. And then, you know, in terms of the content approach, we talk about hero, hub, and help content. So hero content is the really high production value content that you might use as kind of something to drive lots and lots of people to your channel. You'll make this content usually for sort of on an occasional basis. Much more important or much more regular is going to be like your hub content, which is going to be, let's say you've taken a topic and you want to serialize it. You want to have 5 or 6 different videos on that particular topic, so that your channel then becomes a hub for that topic, because people know that there's a lot of videos about that topic that they can look at, watch in sequence. And then the help content is more like if there's something trending on the news and you want to respond to it relatively quickly, or there's a question that keeps coming up in the clinic and you want to try to respond to that or address that, then you can create a one-off video which has got usually a question in the title, and that then becomes the help content that people typically discover via search on YouTube. And then finally, I just want to talk a little bit about short form content. So it's really gone mainstream. Obviously, looking at what TikTok's done, we've now launched YouTube Shorts, and you know, in a recent survey, over 70% of people said that they regularly watch short form video. So it's become a kind of a staple of people's media and video consumption. The nice thing about Shorts is it's really easy to get started. So if you're just starting your channel, it may be a good thing to just double down on Shorts to start with. You can use the YouTube app in order to very easily start filming your short. You can then also add music to your short, and there's a variety of different you know, chart topping music available license free for you to add to your short. You can also then put different green screens and effects and whatnot onto your video very quickly and easily via the app itself. And so it's worth experimenting with Shorts. We have got I've highlighted a few channels which are doing some really good stuff specifically with Shorts. So you've got Dr. Julie, who I mentioned before, has got some great mental health shorts. You've got Abraham the pharmacist. You've got the NHS channel that Joe will talk about in more detail. They've got some great shorts. And you've also got Dr. Curran. He's got lots and lots of shorts which have done really well on the platform. I was going to end by playing this video as a kind of segue into Joe's bit, but I don't believe it's going to play ball for me, so apologies. Let me try. I appreciate the irony of it, that I'm sort of sitting here from YouTube talking to you about YouTube, and I've not managed to get my YouTube videos to play, so I do apologize about that. But anyway, sorry, you had the text and voice only version of the presentation, but that's everything that I wanted to say, and so I'll pass back to you now, Jacqueline.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Vishal. I mean, I'm not going to lie, I spent a lot of my staycation this year deep diving into YouTube. So I've now learned some really, really good tips and tricks for this special vlogging camera that I got as my Christmas present. But
Brilliant.
More to the point, we actually have a couple of questions already, more for clarification and deep dive for you, which centers around the topic of misinformation. So we're really happy to see that YouTube is working in this direction, because obviously, not just in general terms within the obesity community, we see a lot of misinformation. There are actually studies which we've been working on, certainly from a policy perspective, and again, based in Brussels. So the European Commission has a whole program of work in their evidence generating arm, literally on misinformation in the digital space. So this is extremely useful. So the first question which came up related to that is, how does YouTube actually validate content? Because it's all well and good saying, and I know I'm being harsh, but I'm getting to the heart of the matter here. It's all well and good saying, okay, as done by a healthcare professional, HCP, whatever. Unfortunately, due to lack of generalized education on obesity, and particularly early diagnosis and screening, treatment and long-term management, and the jury's out in terms of proper obesity prevention, there are a lot of, quite frankly, random thoughts going around based on either ad hoc experience or someone's, could be biased opinion, but they happen to be, they would qualify. So our question is, how do you do this? How are individual doctors, organizations, how are they assessed and validated in order to be on the channel? And the second part to that is, what are the sanctions if you find that actually the content is bogus?
So yeah, thanks, Jacqueline. In terms of the approach that we take, so in order to be eligible for health features that I outline, which is the label against each one of your videos, and then also the potential to feature in those health shelves, you need to basically have your channel verified, and so that's done at the channel level. So at the channel level, we will ask for the self-attestation, we'll ask for the medical license. But as you say, there are, of course, those individuals who've got that license who will pass those other tests. We then also run a check on your channel to make sure that you've never had a previous strike, or what we call a equivalent of a violation against any of our misinformation policies. And so if there's ever been a previous strike on your channel, that would preclude you, or it would at least require us to investigate the channel further. So that's one of the main checks that we will be doing to see if you've got a track record of previously sharing misinformation. And then once you are verified, there is an ongoing process which doesn't apply only to health content on the platform. It doesn't apply only to the verified sources content. This is literally across the board on YouTube. Every single video that is uploaded will be checked by the algorithms, and the combination of the algorithms and the humans in the loop. And we will be looking for misinformation. And so if we find any misinformation on any one of your videos and you are a verified source, that then leads to a strike on your channel, that then leads to a conversation, leads to further review of your channel. Potentially, at some point, it could lead to removal of that video. If there are then multiple strikes, it can lead to suspension temporarily or permanently of your actual account. So those are then the stepwise consequences that take place sanctions wise. We can only put sanctions on related to the content on the platform. It's nothing to do with one's licensing, etc. We can't go down that road. So that's the approach that we would take, basically. Now, when things are lower quality information or lower credibility coming from a verified source, that is different. That, as I was saying earlier, is that gray area where we don't have the grounds or the right to remove that content. But that is content that we would then keep an eye on. So at the moment, we're still in the early stages with these verified professionals on the health features. But the idea would be that if there's a misinformation, then they would get a strike, and we would address that and remove that video, or potentially look to suspend the channel over a period of time. And then if it's lower quality content, then I think typically we'll have a relationship with everyone who's been verified, and so we'll know them personally, or they will have attended one of our events, or they'll be engaged with us in some shape or form. And so we can then have the conversation with folks. And so this isn't a kind of you're in and you're in forever and there's nothing we can do about it. It's very much an ongoing two-way process to make sure what's on those shelves is always as high quality as possible.
Yeah, because I think actually, and this takes us to our second element now, which basically, and thanks to Nez, goes on to really thinking about how do you beat the algorithm. Now, before I launch into that particular question, I was going to mention as well Health on the Net. So, which is a health information accreditation system originally started in Switzerland, because as you say, there are a lot, you have a 50% international audience. And certainly from the policy community, unfortunately, I can't send YouTube videos to be taken into account by the European Commission, even if I think it's an absolutely brilliant presentation or intervention, I can't send them unless they're what they call tier 1 or tier 2 information or data sources. So that means governmental or something that's really been improved. And something like Health on the Net, HON, is one of those approved accreditation systems. So I would say, and we'll probably come back to this again with Joe and again with Alistair as well, so think about it in your interventions, how to make sure that it's not something which it's not a quality seal, so to speak, which is only company specific, because actually it makes it much more difficult for us as policy and community activists and advocates to make sure that the points which are raised on those videos can actually be embedded and don't just have anecdotal evidence. But I see Alistair bursting to get in there. Do you want to say something before I ask my algorithm question?
No, that's all good.
I know. Oh, Vishal, you knew you were going to be in the hot seat on this one. We all love YouTube, which is the second part of the question, which is actually about, in effect, beating the algorithm. Now, I think Shanez has put it down, or Shanez has put it down very well. A lot of YouTube and other digital platform users get drowned unless they're basically willing to pay for advertising. I know from personal experience, I don't look that much at the policy output on YouTube. I do look a lot at Judge Judy. What can I say? Because it's fun. But what I also saw over my summer break was that because I was looking up, as you were saying in your original intro, and points being made, I was looking up things which were of interest to me, which at that point were a certain set of brothers in Romania undergoing some serious legal situations, put it that way. They shall remain nameless. But as a result of all of that, the YouTube algorithm has me as actually very right-wing conservative American. So I literally keep receiving all of these videos. And that's from a user perspective. And then from what Shanice was saying, again, you're being drowned if you're someone who's not willing to pay. So either way, the algorithm can actually play tricks, shall we say. So how do we beat it as non-for-profits or individuals looking for decent information, be that policy or just I'm going down the YouTube rabbit hole?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would say that, first of all, the health features, when we talk about the 2,000 eligible watch hours, any watch time generated by advertising doesn't count. So those who are just artificially inflating their watch time with advertising will not get into the health features. And so you can assume that everything that's in the health features has grown organically, to be honest. I think that an element of advertising can be helpful. I know, for example, Joe and team and others have sometimes put a few dollars behind some of their campaign videos. And so that can be useful, but it's only worthwhile if the actual content itself is worth watching. So, there's no point otherwise driving people to that content, and that you have other content that you want people to discover because they have now they've understood that your channel exists. So ultimately, it still always comes back to content quality. It doesn't matter how much advertising you do. I would say it is a slow game, and it is, probably most of the people who I highlighted that have got to 1 million plus subs, they've been on the platform for at least 10 years. So with a few exceptions of, viral sensations, and obviously it just depends what type of content you're doing. But I would say it's very unlikely you're going to have much success on the platform in the first 2 years, 3 years. It's definitely going to take longer than that. And the vast majority of people will probably give up, and that's totally fine. That's just the way it goes. Ultimately, what you're left with, the people who end up being successful, are the ones who are really tenacious and they kept going. But you know what? But the main thing I would say is they kept going because there was a very specific purpose, an objective that they were trying to fulfill with their content. And so that was their North Star, and it kept them going. But also they were really enjoying the process. And that's why I said the have fun bit is so important, because if you're just doing it for views, if you're just doing it for dollars, then it's not going to work out, because you won't have that sustainable, you won't be able to stay in the game long enough. But yeah, those are just some thoughts I've got. But I know, Joe, you had your hand up.
Yep, I see Joe's hand. Go on. Good segue as well, because I'm sure I'm being told we need to move on, but go on.
Yeah, I think
I think what's really important is to be realistic with your expectations and what you deem as success. So for us on the NHS YouTube channel, we have about just under 150,000 subscribers, but that's not a measure of success for us. We publish content on a range of different subjects, so we don't have that sort of North Star of a single focus for a channel. We don't have just all Judge Judy videos, for example. We're diabetes video one day, and then the next day it will be about breast cancer, and then about vaccines. So it's a real range, which is not, we believe, what people want to subscribe. They want to subscribe to a channel that has the same sort of content over and over again, that kind of hub content around a specific subject or a specific individual. But where we have seen success is very much through search. So when people are looking for specific bits of information about a specific health topic, we will be there in that search. So the views from our content through search have increased to about 60-ish% since we launched our YouTube strategy last year. So about 60% of views come through search for our videos. We've increased the watch time from just over a minute to just over 2 minutes. And we've increased the click-through rate from impressions on our thumbnails from under 1% to over 7%. So those little things, and building on the kind of the tips and the advice that Vishal has shared with us, have really demonstrated some real impact. But we're very realistic with our kind of viewing figures and our numbers. We know we're not going to get 1 million views like Mr. Beast in an hour, for example, but we might get to that stage over 3 or 4 years. So it is very much a long game for us, and we recognize the value of how people discover and look for information, and over time that content will be really useful for a larger number of people.
Exactly. And I think also, of course, you've just summarized your next intervention in all of 2 sentences, but I'm going to hand over to you to walk us through properly, if I may. Oh, and the key message, in case anybody missed that, was do YouTube for the love of being on camera. Don't do it because you want to be famous or earn immediate money. I feel like I'm Judge Judy now. But anyway, okay, so Joe, walk us through how to create the best possible content. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Jacqueline. So hi, everyone. Very nice to be here. Very nice to be invited. So I'm Joe. I lead part of the social media function within the National Health Service in England. The remit of the channels that I look after is all public health information. So anything that requires the public to understand about their health or take action or use services within the NHS, that falls within my remit. These are the main channels that we operate on from sort of an organic perspective, if you like. We do run a lot of paid activity, as you can imagine, but the focus of me and my team at the moment are across YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and whatever the bird site wants to call itself at this moment in time. All of which have different audiences, all of which have different approaches to how we deal with their content. But I'll talk you through these 5 points today, which I hope will be really useful for you. So I'm going to talk through our user-centered approach to content. We'll talk about accessibility, which is incredibly important. Share a little bit about what's working well. Talk about some challenges or opportunities if we're feeling positive. And then ending up with some top tips on how to build an influential platform. And I've got some handy links at the end to some of the stuff that I'll reference as we talk here as well. So we're really fortunate in my team to sit within the same part of the NHS that manages the NHS website, nhs.uk, which I'm not quite sure how many of you are from the UK, but you may have heard of it, but it's a very popular website. And everything that is created in there has users at the very center of what it does. So we do an incredible amount of user research. We talk to people with health conditions, we talk to policy people, we talk to charities and other organizations to help us make sure that the content we create is as easy to understand and as helpful as possible, so that people know, can start to understand what's wrong with them or what might be wrong with them, or then importantly, how to get the help that they need. And we have built on that or kind of taken that same approach into our work on YouTube as well. If we can just pop back a slide a sec. So we had some real challenges at the beginning of our YouTube work, because I really struggled to know what on earth should we make content on. There is so much that we could cover. There's so much that we should cover, but we had to be really focused on our audience and what we knew they wanted to look for, what they were searching for, but also then trying to balance that against the priorities of the NHS as a whole and the Department of Health. So I think we found a good kind of middle ground there to focus on our slightly younger audience on YouTube, because we know that this younger audience don't use the NHS website as much. And we cover topics that we know that they're looking for. So we do a lot of SEO research in the background to understand the words they use, the phrases, how they discover content. And the evidence is suggesting that that is working for us. So this video about how to put on a condom was born out of our sexual health suite of content we made, that's had almost 600,000 views in about 5 or 6 months-ish, I think now, which is great. And we can see from the analytics that people are watching it a lot of the way through. They're kind of going back to chapters in there so they can revisit parts of it and to understand how to do this, which is really great for us. And the next slide, please. And as well as users being at the heart of everything we do, we have accessibility is incredibly important for us. We have to make sure that our content is accessible, understandable, visible to everyone who needs it. So the colors went a bit weird on this, on my little hello badges, but I'll talk about that in a sec. But captions, subtitles and voiceovers on video are incredibly important. YouTube has functionality that Vishal touched on in terms of kind of translated content and dubbing, which is very new but very exciting, and I think will be incredibly useful for us. And YouTube obviously has really good captioning functionality as well, but auto-generating captions on YouTube, surprisingly good for AI actually, certainly compared to other platforms, but that's really useful and really important so that everyone can learn and understand what you're saying in your videos. We think very long and hard about the pacing of our content, so we're not rushing through it. We like to take our time over it. We like to make sure the language is clear, so we have very clear guidance and consistent guidance within something that's called our digital service manual, that I'll pop a link to at the end of this, that helps people from within the NHS and beyond to know how to kind of write in an appropriate way when it comes to health content. And things like color contrast, the bottom image was supposed to be a blue lozenge with white writing, which is very accessible and very visible, and the top one was going to be yellow with white writing, but for some reason the colors didn't work. But just to demonstrate that it's really important to make sure that when you're creating assets for social media or print or anywhere really, that people are very easily able to kind of read and make sure everything is legible. And then little simple things like having alt text on images across social media is really important, because we always want to make sure that regardless of everyone's abilities or disabilities, that they are getting the most out of our content. Next slide. So what's working well? If my glass was half full today, I would be saying it's all working wonderfully for us. Most of it's good. Most of it's working really, really well. We have a really clear idea about what we're doing now across all of our social channels and YouTube especially. We create a lot of our content in-house within my team and within a multimedia team who we work very closely with. We've been working with clinicians, these kind of medical creators who Vishal has touched on, to help almost be the stars of some of our content. So we've kind of leveraged the relationships with them and the introductions via YouTube to get these really great people to be on camera. So they have their own existing channels and audiences, but importantly they are able to deliver really engaging, considered, authentic messaging for us on our channels to help educate people. And then we also have campaign content. So the NHS run a lot of public health messaging and lots of public health campaigns, which runs through the channels that I look after. And we've been supplementing some of that kind of hero content with a lot of help content that sits underneath that. So there's a really good example for us around a bowel cancer screening campaign that was run last year. That was very top line. If you're over the age of, I think it's 60, but don't quote me on that, you will get sent a bowel screening kit through the post. And we created content that kind of sat under that. So when people were interested and looking for information on how to do that, we had information, and YouTube has been an incredibly powerful platform for us. We've had nearly 30,000 views of our video of how to use a bowel screening kit, for example. So we're providing another level of information and detail for people that helps them to kind of get positive health outcomes. And on to the next slide. But there are some challenges or opportunities. So there are so many opportunities for us that sometimes becomes a challenge. I've touched on the fact that we had some trouble with YouTube in terms of like, what do we make? Where do we go? How do we start? But we've kind of overcome that. And I think being really narrowing down kind of our strategy and our audience and the reason for why we're in that space has really helped us. Listening to your social engagement is key. So when we post content to YouTube or to other social channels, we very much read the comments. We can see how people are reacting to that content. We may then feed that back into a public health campaign to change the messaging or change the content so that we're being reactive in that space. Now, that doesn't always happen quickly. In some circumstances, it does happen more quickly than others, but it's really valuable to be providing that almost live user research, that live feedback back into what we're doing. So we make sure we do that across campaigns, across our social content, and onto content that is on the NHS website as well. And then I've touched on the relationships we've got with the medical creators is phenomenal. It's quite difficult to manage sometimes on a kind of a one-to-one basis when we've got so many people who are really kindly interested in helping us, but we see the engagement on the content they help us create soar above other bits of content for us, which is really useful and just adds another credible, authentic voice into the content for us. Clinical and policy sign-off for us have also been a slight challenge. So obviously these are incredibly important. As the National Health Service, we have a clear and huge responsibility to be making sure that the information we share online or anywhere is the best it possibly can be. And I think we're quite proud of the stuff that we've produced across our social channels and on YouTube especially, in that it has been through several layers of clinical and policy sign-off to make sure that what we're putting out there is the best it possibly can be. And obviously we listen to the feedback. If we don't get things right, we change that. And that happens, and people are very vocal in terms of sharing their opinions and their experiences, all of which are valid and all of which we can kind of pull together to consider how we progress and change content in future. But it does get easier as people understand what you're doing and how you're doing it. That process gets much simpler. And the next slide. So top tips, I touched on this a little bit with an answer to the question. Success will not come overnight. So be realistic in terms of what you want to expect. The search element on YouTube for us is key. That's how people find our content. That's how we want to be discovered. I did have this lofty ambition that we should be the first video that people watch on YouTube about a health condition, which I'm still undecided whether that is right or too ambitious. But actually, I think with the work that's being done on the platform to surface great trusted content now, maybe that's not a problem. But at the very least, they can watch our content and we know they'll go on and watch something else afterwards due to the nature of how people use the internet. But that's really important for us. So define what good looks like for you. Is it we want people to find our content through search? Is it I want 1 million subscribers? And if it is, that's great. But then you've got a goal that you can really focus on and narrow down your strategic approach on how to reach that. And always focus on what your users need. So the content we create is very much born through talking to people, understanding what people are looking for. And that gives us a really great platform on which to build on. So we know the stuff we produce will get watched. We know that people are searching for the phrases we use in our content. We know the thumbnails are great. We know that through the support from YouTube, it's coming up on the health shelf. So we know people are going to get that trusted, useful, helpful information. And don't compromise on accessibility. That really is key. That is the hill I will die on. So I will forever say no to publishing content on my channels if it does not meet the standards. I think a lot of people within departments are probably annoyed / bored with me for talking about this all the time, but it's so important that everyone can get to your content and use it. And feel free to experiment. I think testing and learning should be at the heart of everything. So you can listen to your users, you can do user research and understand what they all want, but these platforms change all the time. The introduction of shorts on YouTube is relatively new, but it's a really good, easy way into that platform to build that credible content, build an audience and allow you to learn and listen, and then take a next step into that slightly longer form YouTube content. But if something doesn't work on social, as long as you're sensible with what you're putting out there, you can just try stuff and see what works and look at the data and look at the engagement and the comments and use that to refine what you're doing to get the best influence on your channels. And I think that's my last slide. Well, the next slide just has some links. So this is all being shared. So I've got a link to our YouTube channel because obviously it's great and you should all look at it. We've done some really great stuff on Instagram similarly, which you should check out. And there's a link to the NHS Digital Service Manual, which talks about accessibility and how to write for health content. There's some content standards in there that kind of give you advice on how to produce health content. And there's also a handy little color and contrast checker to make sure anything that you produce is accessible from that kind of color point of view as well, which I constantly find invaluable. So there we go. I hope there are some questions. I can check out the chat, but yeah, thank you very much.
Jacqueline, I was wondering if I could jump in with a question, maybe.
Please.
I was just going to ask, thanks, Joe. I was going to ask from everyone, people's perspective who are listening, there might be small teams who are trying to get digital going, and it's overwhelming how many channels there are, how many, and digital goes beyond to email newsletters, it goes to updating your website, etc. And then there's the rest of comms. So overstretch, and I think you touched on it, but like how best can they focus? And then I guess the flip side of it is, I'm sure lots of people are trying to reach different audiences, but there's only maybe one social media account that's trying to reach them all at the same time. I wonder, if you had any opinion on that, whether, how you focus, and then also how you decide when it's right to have different channels, if it's manageable for different audiences.
Yeah, good questions. So overstretched teams, I mean, there's a lot of platforms to be on, and I think when we're fortunate to have a decent sized team to manage all of this content with a National Health Service, we are fortunate to have the brand, the recognition, and the resource in most cases. We could always do with more, but I think it doesn't have to. I think just focusing on where your audiences are, I think where do you get the most engagement is really useful, but trying not to overstretch yourself and not to feel the pressure that you have to be everywhere. I think there's probably the potential to do damage to be everywhere and not do that one channel or two channels that you feel are manageable. And really focus on that, really understand the audience. Who is there? What are they interested in? What are they engaging with? What do they want? Ask them what they want, and kind of create that content in that one space. So it does feel overwhelming at times. We have, beyond the platforms that we focus on that I mentioned earlier, we have a presence on every single social platform, a lot of which is sometimes used for paid stuff, but there's this huge pressure, there's this huge opportunities for us to be active in these spaces. So we're not on TikTok actively, but we know that from a youth angle, like, so valuable to be in that space to understand what's going on there, but for reasons we're not, which is fair and that's sensible. But again, we've made that decision to not be in that space at this point in time. So yeah, don't get too distracted by everything and focus on what works and where your audiences are. And then the different audiences one is really, really interesting, because there is always this temptation to let's just have another account on Twitter or somewhere else. But I think it really depends on what your objectives from your actions and your activity are, and really thinking about a channel strategy and thinking about how are you best going to get to those people. Is digital even the right way? Maybe it's not. Are there other networks that you can leverage or partnership with who do have access to these people and these channels, and how can you align with them or work together and collaborate? I think so. There are probably some opportunities there to leverage other supportive resources in that respect, rather than trying to start from scratch or build an audience, which we all know is very difficult.
Yeah, I mean, indeed, I want to thank you so much for that, Alistair, because I wanted to build on that with slightly nuance. Again, going back to policy community, we live on LinkedIn. I mean, so even if we produce something which is X, Twitter, whatever, and or YouTube, we curate it in terms of commentary on LinkedIn to give it a bit of our own corporate or individual personality. But what I wanted to ask as well is, obviously within the UK system, you've got NHS England and Wales, but you've also got NHS Scotland as well, and I'm guessing NHS Northern Ireland. So how are you able to, if you like, not duplicate or be complementary with content from other devolved health regions, because a lot of us here on the call and within the open network, we're actually representing pan-European organizations. So EASO is in 36 different countries across WHO Euro out of the 53. So we're actually not for policy, but for our general corporate messaging. For policy, we're a lot more targeted, but we have to be aware that we actually have these different countries. Same for the patient association as well, across multiple countries. And then if you look at countries like Spain or even Germany, Belgium, where I live, in Belgium we have at least 4 different languages because of the geographic official languages. Regions in Spain and Italy. So how do you cope with that? Certainly from a NHS UK perspective, because I think that's something that's definitely transferable to the minds of others dealing across different regions within other countries and also across countries.
Yeah, so it's not an area that I'm completely up to speed on. I mean, so England, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland have their own devolved healthcare services, essentially. And whilst there are similarities, I guess, in terms of the advice and the health information that we produce, the actions that people take and the policies and the ways people get treated, that does differ often across all of the nations. So whilst there is probably an element of duplication and alignment to some extent with some of the stuff, how people get help and the processes that sit behind the help they get will differ, which I think is important. Then because of that difference, it's important for those nations to kind of own their own policies and own their own kind of communications around that. So I think the languages questions is really good, really important. So we do produce health information in other languages, not as much I think as we could and should. On a local NHS level, it's done a lot more, if I'm honest. So that because I think they're close to the communities, I think that's easier. From my kind of national health messaging perspective, the options on YouTube with the language dubbing is really valuable, I think. So as that grows, I think we would absolutely be looking to leverage that. We have to go through, obviously I've talked about the clinical sign-off processes. We need to make sure we've got clinicians who can understand that translated content and have the resource to do that as well. So there are some fair challenges, I think, in terms of us producing more content in translated language, but they're not insurmountable. And I think on a local level, when people are in an NHS service and getting the help they need, there is information available in those languages. Where is there more we can do from a kind of a national website perspective on this? Absolutely. Always, I think there's always space to improve and do more around this, definitely. But it's something that we're very aware of.
Right. I mean, I would say, of course, shameless plug for EASO work here. Don't forget, 36 countries, multiple languages, lots of clinicians and public health practitioners, and about to go to publication, our taxonomy exercise with a total glossary of obesity in the language of chronic disease. So, shameless plug. So I would say get in touch after the call, have the discussion to make sure that the language is accurate, precise, and that actually, particularly for obesity, because there is a paucity of accurate information on the web, regardless of how you search for it, on obesity in general. Yeah. Okay. End of plug. Alistair.
Hello. Thank you very much.
So you're going to tell us the differentiation between, shall we say, personal and institutional branding and creating online visibility, which, as we know, my LinkedIn friend, is one of my personal favorites. So
yeah, there'll be lots of plugs for Jacqueline's LinkedIn profile. I guess we've sort of gone from content, and I'm broadening it out a bit to sort of wider visibility and engaging the audiences that matter to you as an organization, whether they are policymakers, the media, investors. Principles are the same, they just need to be applied in different ways. So There's some quite quick slides here. So Emily, are you ready? So first of all, this is me. So I work with clients, primarily healthcare clients, although interestingly, I used to work with a European innovation institution who had lots of different offices around Europe, and we had similar challenges. How do you bring them in on communications? How do you source case studies, et cetera, et cetera? So if any questions on that, then please pop them in the chat. But essentially, I help organizations engage with their audiences, and I do that mainly through digital because I'm a digital specialist. But digital doesn't change the principles really. So I'm looking really for one thing, and that thing is, drumroll, engagement. So if you're looking for visibility, you're looking for trust, you know, it all stems from engagement. You want people to engage with your content, whether that is a policy paper, whether that is an email newsletter, you know, depends, you know, they might be the first time they're encountering you as an organization, or it might be the 100th time, you know, and you might want different types of engagement depending on where they are in that journey. But engagement essentially means active participation in my vision. It's not actually my vision, it's whoever I'm working with at the time. So your vision. So what you're looking for is, for example, a policymaker to demonstrate an active participation in your vision. And I think you touched on this, Jacqueline, you know, how the key question is, how do we cut through all the noise and build real and meaningful engagement in a sustainable way? You know, I'm sure you're all small organizations. How can we make it sustainable and actually achieve impact when so many other people are talking? So as an individual, and I've just completed a piece of work looking at 100 executives in their use of LinkedIn. So some of these insights come from that work. But number one is, if you are setting up as an individual on social media, probably LinkedIn, but it might be another account you're using professionally, I think the number one thing is to be authentic. What a lot of studies into trust show is that, you know, people do want to see the individuals behind organizations, and it really helps to land, you know, supportive messaging for your organization, but also to build those connections with stakeholders that, you know, sort of as an organization you can't really. So you need to take advantage of that and be authentic and be who you are, and to showcase, you know, parts of your personality and your interests. So if you look at some of the sort of biggest executives or whoever they are on LinkedIn, you know, there'll be a dose of their personal life in there as well. And I think that's really important. Secondly, if you're an individual setting up a LinkedIn account, have a think about what you're going to talk about. You know, what do you want to talk about? What are you interested in? There's probably something professional, maybe something personal, and something maybe more general, like about leadership or something like that. So what are the key things, you know, you're interested in and you want to focus on? And then on the next one, you know, it's about value, really, a value exchange. It doesn't matter who you're talking to, it's about the value you can provide and the value, you know, they can provide to you. So what value are you providing by posting online? You know, are you providing insights? Are you providing analysis? Are you just engaging on others and being supportive? You know, what is the value you're providing? And there's another point here, and it's that sustainability piece. You know, don't do this if you don't want to, and don't do it if you don't have the time to do it, because, you know, it does need to be sustained. And I'm sure I see Jacqueline nodding, you know, you need to have an interest in doing it, because it can't just be a post a month, for example. And so this is a sort of a general model of aspiration if you're an individual trying to build visibility online. You know, you want to be seen, that's number one. So you want to be seen as leading your category. You want to be heard, so you want people to listen to the content that you're publishing consistently and with authority. And you want to be engaged, so you want people to engage with your content, share it, comment, etc. So next slide. So some basics here, really. On what, you know, if you took this tomorrow, what could you do? So for the be seen line, my first piece of advice is to search on LinkedIn for who's talking in your space about the things you're interested in. You know, who's sharing a lot, who's commenting under that, what are they talking about, etc. Just understand what's going on. Apart from anything, it's a good source of intel, whether it's professional or personal interest. And then if you're not ready to post yet, then comment. You know, it's very easy to comment under people's posts. And actually, the way the algorithm works on LinkedIn, when you do start posting, the commenting it plays into the favor of the algorithm and your content gets pushed higher. So, and then on to be heard. So when you're ready to post, think, you know, what am I going to talk about, as we discussed, and maybe set yourself a target. Right, okay, I'm going to try and post once a week and maybe comment on someone's post every day or something like that. You know, what is the target, a realistic target you can set for yourself? Then how can you build that engagement? One quick way, if you've got going, you're posting, you're commenting, it's going well, there's something called creator mode. You can very easily turn it on. It boosts your posts in the algorithm, but also you can add some extra bits, like at the top, you can add what you're interested in talking about. People can also follow you. So that's a good way of taking it to the next level. You can also then think about doing something more than a post, you know, or commenting on news stories. You can, you know, think about, oh, I could do a little video to camera, I could do a photo out of myself at a congress. You know, how can I take this up a level? Because, you know, all the algorithms favor, you know, a sort of commenting, variety of assets, regular activity. That they're all the things that will lead to success. Next slide, please, Emily. Okay, so that's individuals. Any comments about individuals, put them in the chat and I'll pass them all over to Jacqueline. And then on to organizations. So as an organization, how can we build influence and trust and visibility with those who matter? Well, this is a sort of, on the left, a traditional sort of public affairs, government relations model. A sort of triangle of political intelligence, media relations, and stakeholder outreach. And you'd be doing that in different ways, meetings, etc. And that's still there. However, what is around it is different touch points, different digital touch points to really continue the conversation. And I've just put a few in here: newsletters, social media, exec visibility. But as we said before, there are so many. You know, social media, there's paid, there's organic, there's, you know, your website, there's policy papers, there's all sorts that can be done digitally. So you need to choose what those touch points are. But I guess my point here is that, you know, it hasn't shifted the nature of what influences people. It's just shifted the number of touch points available and this sort of accuracy and precision with how you can reach people at the right point. So on the next slide, this is Greenpeace's engagement pyramid. I thought, you know, I'm not sure. I mean, a lot of organizations I work with don't have the resources to look into this, and you might not, but it's a good way of thinking about your audience. You know, who are we trying to reach and at what point in this pyramid are they? So if you're trying to talk to a policymaker, maybe you've connected with a policymaker on LinkedIn, you know, are they just observing what your organization are doing? You know, have they actually endorsed what you're doing in the past? Or, and this is where you want them to get to, is, you know, they're an advocate and they're leading and they're championing for you. So when thinking about that, think about, okay, so how can we move these individuals or these groups up that pyramid in terms of engagement? And if your audience is in a pyramid and layered, then next slide, then you have to be too. So everyone's busy, everyone's running in and out, people that don't have long, and with so many digital apps, they have even less time. So how can you serve people with the right content at the right time? And I think part of this is offering layered content. So, you know, someone might only have 30 seconds. So that is where a social post might come in handy. But some people might want a bit more detail and to understand it a bit more. And that's where maybe a webinar or an infographic or something with a bit more information. And then someone who might want all the detail, that's where a paper comes in. So really think about those layers. Like if you come up with a wonderful paper and it's for a policy audience, don't just go out with the paper, because that only serves the people who want all the detail. How can you break that up into bits? How can there be something for those who want just the context? Or how can there be something for those who want just the lure, the tiny bit? And how might they connect together? And how might you bring one person from maybe the social post through to the paper? So think about that. And in terms of next slide, here are some tips. So know who you're trying to engage. Obvious one. With everything you're doing, who are we trying to engage? Don't try and have too many audiences. Think, okay, this is for this audience. This is why it's on this channel, because that's where they are. And this is what we're trying to get them to do. And this is an example from the European Cancer Organization. I think the post, is fine. But things like they posted on Instagram, it's got a link. Now, Instagrams, you can't have links. So, they can't drive that user anywhere. Is an oncology workforce on Instagram? I'm not sure. I haven't done a lot of deep dive into it, but maybe there's another space where, you could, I don't know, contact a group on LinkedIn of oncologists and ask if they can share that in that group, So how can you make sure you're reaching the right people? And next slide. Next one is be current. So this is all about, you need to show how your relevance as an organization. Lots of people like the RNIB in the UK, who are the Royal National Institute for Blind People, they are very good at spotting something news relating to accessibility and jumping, well, not jumping on it, but adding this angle, using it as an opportunity to express their values. So how can you as an organization do that too? And partner with those who have influence. I think someone said earlier about YouTube not getting a lot of traction. One of the ways is to look at those who are getting traction, and that's, I'm not, by influence, I don't mean an influencer of a sort of celebrity type necessarily. That could be maybe an exec within your organization has a good LinkedIn following and is connected with the right people. It might be you have a patient group that you affiliate with. It might be actually, this personality who has spoken a lot about this in this space. So think about, who has influence and who can help to bolster your sort of visibility. And here are a couple of examples. Sorry, Emily, just on that. So the Hepcast is a podcast we've done around hepatitis, bringing voices from the policy space, but also the patient from patients. And the bottom one was a video about a respiratory virus, and that was, patient-centered, and then sort of sold into media for stories, and there was lots off the back of that. So think about those, partnering with those influence. And then next slide. Conscious of time, I'll wrap up very quickly. Finally, make it easy. As I said, have layers of content. How can you make it easy for people to engage? I'm not picking on the European Cancer Organization. It's just there are always points of improvement in anyone's social post. But here, you've got 2 links, so it's confusing. What do you want me to click on as a user? How I don't know what to click on. So the next example for Greenpeace, there's something called Cialdini's 7 Principles of Persuasion, and it's all about how you might persuade people to do something. Here is a good example of, they've made it very easy for someone to sign this petition. There's authority. We're sending this directly to the Prime Minister. There's social proof. So this is the idea, X amount of people have already done this, you should do this too. There's this idea of unity. You'll be with us, help us. There's also minimal barriers. So here you only have to fill in your first name and last name. You don't have to give any other data. And then also there's an easy call of action, but it's also an unusual call of action to sort of add my name. So in short, know who you're trying to reach and go to the spaces they are online, and then make it easy for them to take an action and understand where they are in terms of those level of interests and match them at those points. And that is it, I think. Sorry, I was whistle stop tour through.
I know, but so enjoyable. I've just learned so much. Okay, I am mindful of time. Burning questions, either from the panel and or audience. What do you want to know about LinkedIn? I have plenty of stories and questions.
Well, maybe I'll throw it onto you, Jacqueline. In terms of, I mean, you're obviously established on LinkedIn,
Yeah.
but if someone was starting out, what did you find difficult in terms of like getting visibility or connecting with the right people?
Yeah. Okay. So bear in mind that I was on LinkedIn when there was still competition for LinkedIn as a definitive platform. I was also on LinkedIn before they were taken over by Microsoft. So Microsoft made my life so much easier, because as all of you said on the panel, do this for the love of, not because you're actually trying to be strategic about it. So what I discovered, having started on LinkedIn, I think more than 15 years ago now, actually, I mean, I just love this platform. I gave up Facebook and moved to LinkedIn. I mean, you know, so I think that what I discovered along the way is that I see a lot of people in my day-to-day when I'm wandering through Brussels. A lot of us, again, because I've been in the Brussels environment since '95, so a lot of people we've grown up together professionally and we've changed jobs. And funnily enough, a lot of us have moved around different topics in healthcare. So it's not only a way of seeing who's moving where, but also that it allows us to make that bridge between, for instance, I know a lot of people in cancer or in diabetes or in respiratory. So, but we're still following each other. So we're actually able to take those points into our own day-to-day. I think what I found the most difficult as a more junior person was actually understanding that, you know, the center of my universe is not the center of anybody else's universe. So I really had to explain when I was sending that note to Connect at the time, why it was so important for somebody, a VIP, to connect with me. What I found is that because rightly or wrongly, I really am my authentic self on LinkedIn. I mean, really, I have stuff to say. So what that means is that sometimes people are thinking, I just never dare to say that. I mean, really. But it also means that it builds trust. So I think that the biggest challenge, depending on which stage we're at in our career, is understand that people who are more senior need a reason to connect. People like really, and it's not about seniority, it's about actual value and content. I know both ends of it now. And people who are more junior actually need to understand that they do have value and to bring to that particular table and dare. So if I look at my network now, oh yes, that was another big thing. If I look at my network now, I don't leave it open to everybody, because actually LinkedIn is so large now that there are a lot of people who strategically connect just to say that they've connected with you. And, you know, so on my profile, you can only actually see who your common connections are already, deliberately so. So yeah, it's things like that to actually get to know the system. Know that you can be authentic, but, you know, keep it legal, essentially. And also to understand that I'm now in a situation whereby, because I went over a certain threshold, because I'm coming up to the 4,000 now without trying, that actually it automatically switches on to follow. So it's not that easy for regular, you know, starters out to actually get my attention without explaining why they should have my attention. And I've also had to play around a bit with the algorithms as well. So basically, yeah, so I've had to play around with the algorithm as well, because all of a sudden I started just seeing the same people And it's good to be aware that LinkedIn, as in other channels, they really do change the algorithm to keep you on your toes. So you have to keep ahead of that. I follow pages, which, I follow a lot of tech pages as well, just because I'm interested.
Just on that, Jacqueline, as well, I guess, I'm conscious of time, but it's also people might be a bit nervous about setting up accounts. People often are like, oh, it's professional, I'm not sure. And obviously in a space like obesity, there are a lot of opinions, a lot of opinions of variety. Is that sometimes difficult, having your professional sort of profile and marrying the two?
No. And I think it's because I've been around for so long. So, I mean, at the moment, I don't only post on obesity. I actually post a lot on access to health services. I post about the litany of my personal chronic conditions, but in a professional setting, what that means. I also post about, because at EU level, we have race discrimination legislation coming through. And I remember posting on, it would be really great to see something on race discrimination and access to health services. Nobody else was talking about this. It got into the strategy. And why? Because the lady who is the race discrimination czar connected with me on Twitter. And then I connected with her on LinkedIn. And then I posted this. A couple of weeks later, boom. And it was literally because nobody dared say anything apart from yours truly. And why? Because that's not my field, but it was something personal that I felt was really important. And it linked back to my day job of access to healthcare. So I think it's actually, again, I say to a lot of people now, I'm at the stage in my career. I mean, we're going on for 30 years. So I'm at the stage where I can say, when I was coming up in the system, I was so afraid to say anything. And that was more about job security. Not knowledge. It was about job security and not going against the norm, so to speak. So I think that people need to find a safe space, not necessarily their day job, but somewhere where they can actually have a real opinion and not just copy paste. Because now I'm not copy pasting. I'm not ignoring my day job. Far from it. I'm always including, but obviously saying personal opinion if it's something that really is something I'm fairly certain we haven't discussed within my work environment, but I feel really strongly about it. And I think that's also really important for people coming up, to be able to be clear as to, is this an organizational opinion, or is this something which is totally, Jacqueline Bowman's opinion? And along the way, I then get messages, and indeed pre-COVID, I'd be walking through the streets and people, because I made the videos and everything about my life, and people would actually come up to me and say, I saw that video, thank you, and they said nothing on LinkedIn, but they would come up to me in person and say, thank you, that needed to be said. So yeah, it's just about having fun with it. And I would say not being afraid, regardless of which stage we are in our careers. So, okay, I think we've just run over, haven't we? But, as you can tell, I'm a real enthusiast. But on that note, I would like to draw to a close our thoughts. And I saw a comment from Mariana. Thank you so much. One of the people I learned from a lot from the European Federation of Dietitians, saying that juniors need an extra boost when connecting and networking. Absolutely. So with that, I would like to say a really heartfelt thanks to all of our roundtable virtual today. I certainly have learned a lot. I think it's safe to say that our participants in the webinar have as well. We're really looking forward to being able to take some of the tips and tricks, honing them both for personal, organizational, and policy usage down the road. And let's just say I'll be connecting certainly with all of you that I haven't already on LinkedIn, and certainly I'll be following you on X or whatever it's called moving forward. Do we have time for one sentence of last word from everybody? Alistair, you go first.
Well, I don't know. Probably have time. One
Go on.
sentence. My thing would just be, and I get to go in first, is just understand why you're doing something. Like, don't just set up a channel for the sake of it. Don't just start LinkedIn. You know, what do you want to do? How does it align with your personal or organizational objectives? And, you know, who are you trying to reach? That's more than one sentence. There are a lot of commas in there.
Indeed. Joe?
I think you're all experts in what you do, so trust your instinct. You can be, a personality goes a long way, I think, Jacqueline, as you've evidenced in terms of how you approach stuff. But that's really important. There are people behind this policy. There are people behind the work you do, and I think sharing that, being open, is really, really important, and not to be afraid to ask people questions. These communities that you can build online are incredibly helpful. The way that Vishal has introduced us to people to get content made has led to other things. A lot of my career progression has been specifically through engagement I've done online, which is invaluable. And finally, I have to go because I've got to get to a hospital for some filming, so I'm going to duck off now, but it was really great to be involved, so thank you very much.
Thank you. And last word to Vishal before we say goodbye to everybody.
I would say just give it a go. You've got very little to lose, but so much to gain. For example, with shorts, it doesn't take a lot of resource to get that uploaded. A post on LinkedIn doesn't take a lot of your time out of your day, but there's potentially so much to gain from just taking the plunge and getting started. So, yeah.
Wonderful. So there you have it, everybody. Have fun. Be targeted, be in it to win it, but don't think it's going to happen overnight. So that's it from us. Thank you so much.